Well, welcome back. This is the 6th of 7 videos looking at project management process groups and knowledge areas. And what we're going to do during this particular video is look at the last two knowledge areas. And we'll start off by looking at the life cycle associated with procurement management. And in this case, it's got 5 different phases. We're going to look at vendor solicitation. Once we get in some proposals from the vendors and we've locked that phase out or closed that phase out, we're going to go to vendor evaluation, and then based on that do a vendor selection, go through and build a contract with that particular vendor, and then we've got to manage and monitor that as it's ongoing. So let's look at each of these in detail. So the vendor solicitation, internally you're going to have to develop your requirements breakdown structure. You actually got to decide that you are going to use a vendor and identify potential vendors that can participate. Often this is done for you as you have a public-facing site where contracts and requests for proposals can be placed, or requests for bids can be placed. Internally, you're going to figure out how you're going to manage all of this and what criteria you're going to use to evaluate the different submissions by different vendors. And then at that point, you're going to prepare and distribute a request for proposal. And normally those are out for 30, 60, 90 days. And while those are out, you're going to get questions back by different vendors. You've got to decide whether you answer specifically only the individual vendor, or you're going back and posting them all publicly so that all vendors benefit from any questions that are asked. All right, once you're done with that, you're going to have a bunch of proposals, hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands of pages of paper or electronic documents, and you're going to have to evaluate those, and that moves you to the vendor evaluation phase. So typically what you do is once you get those things in and need to start evaluating the RFPs, you're going to use some selection criteria. Those are questions that have a yes/no answer to limit the field. That take, let's say you had 300 companies respond back to a particular proposal. When we were working on learning management system a couple of years ago, we had 77 companies submit proposals, and we had to narrow that down to a more reasonable number, and we used selection criteria to get it down to 5. So once you've got the 5 down, then you've got to start working through the actual vendor selection. And as this slide, before I transition to selection, you may want to do on-site presentations. You also may want to have them actually come in and install their software and leave it up for a period of time so that folks can evaluate it, fill out surveys, and give you feedback. All right, so during the vendor evaluation, there are a couple of different ways of doing this. In this particular case, we're looking at 6 different consulting companies that ABCD are the internal experts on the project management team. They're evaluating them, and what they're doing is they're giving them a score between, it appears, 1 and 6, where 1's the highest score and 6 is the lowest score. And when you sum those across, you can see that consultant 2 had the best rank, and that consultant 6 had the worst ranking. All right, so that's one way of doing it. You've got this kind of forced evaluation where you're forcing them in. Another way of doing this is a pairwise comparison. And in this case, you're listing the 6 consultants across the top, and you're listing the 6 consultants vertically. And then you're just doing a comparison against those to figure out who would win in that particular competition. So 1 versus 1 is an X. That means you're comparing the same consultant against each other. And then as you go across 1 versus 2, the 1 would win. 1 versus 3, 1 won. 1 versus 4 is a 0. That means consultant 4 won. And so on and so forth. And so that allows you to rank them. If I go down to consultant 6, it lost. Consultant 6 compared to consultant 1. Okay, I'm reading that bottom row. Consultant 6 compared to consultant 1. That 0 means consultant 6 lost. Okay, and then that series of zeros means they were beat by every single vendor. If you look at, or consultant, if you look at row 4, consultant 4 beat every other consultant when they did that kind of pairwise comparison. And so when you sum across, you see that their ranking is actually the highest, and they are the number one ranked, the best one. All right, very good. Let's move on and look at now the selection process. We've done the evaluation. You're going to select whoever the ultimate vendor is, the winner, and then at that point you're going to have to go into contract negotiation, because you're going to have a better idea now of the requirements, having seen everything, and you're going to have to negotiate that contract, make a decision. And as you can see here, there are three options. You can have a no award. You can say, yep, this was the best that was proposed, but it's still not sufficient. You can have a single award, or you can award multiple companies. This last bit is very critical. You have to figure out what type of contract you want. Do you want a fixed price contract? Those work very well with traditional projects. They do not work very well with agile or extreme projects. And then the time and materials retainer or cost plus. Those are contracts that are going to do a little bit better in the agile and extreme space. All right, that finally brings us down to looking at negotiating the contract. There are lots of different points associated with this. I've always likened it to buying something at the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul. And if you've never been to the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul, the best prices can occur when you walk out of the shop 3 separate times and have a representative of the shop chase you down and bring you back in and offer you some chai or Coca-Cola to continue the negotiations. But if you walk in and just accept their price, it's going to be at a very different point. The slide talks about a couple of different characteristics associated with it, but it's about being explicit and about having a shared understanding of what the requirements are and what the expectations are going to be. Here are some other components that are going to be involved in vendor contracting, and again, you can kind of read through these, but most of them make sense in terms of what you would expect in a contract and for that particular negotiation. All right, a couple of more things here, and again, I'm going to move to the last slide, which is the vendor management. This is where you're setting up vendor expectations, monitoring their progress, and making sure that someone is actually paying attention to the contract and that the vendor is actually delivering the services that are promised. A lot of fraud occurs when you don't have this person, this role in place, where someone is monitoring the contract and making sure that they're doing what the contract that they agreed to specified. All right, guess what? We're down near the end. We've got one knowledge area left, and that's stakeholder management. Here you're trying to engage your sponsors, clients, customers, business process engineers, resource managers, project managers involved in that, of course, and business analysts. So it's bringing all those folks together, make sure they're talking to each other, make sure their needs are being met. Well, you know what? This brings us to the end of 6 of 7 videos that are looking at the process groups and knowledge areas. We're down to one last video, so keep on studying, and I'll see you in the last video when you come back.